Good afternoon. Don Huffmeister again, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about my elementary and intermediate technique books that I created. In this case, we'll talk a little bit about the elementary book, but before we do that, I'd like to answer the question of what are the books really about? Well, they're about the basic sounds, they're about little interval patterns and scales. Nothing more than that, nothing really magical about them, but essential things that every musician needs to know, and particularly every student needs to master at one time or another and in a certain form or another. And so that's what the books are about. I think it maybe is important too to answer, well, how is it that I happened to write the books, or where was the seed planted for this? Well, as I told you, because I taught instrumental music at the elementary and intermediate school, that certainly was a very big motivator. But way back when, at my very first lesson in the 1930s, my Uncle Frank, while teaching me trumpet, he had the book that was called The National Self-Teacher. That happened to be in the case that came with the used Wonder cornet that my parents had bought me. And it was written in 1925. It cost 25 cents, if you'll believe it, and you could have it mailed to you for 3 cents. And when Frank opened up the book, what he saw was this. This was the very first page. You can see, my Lord, that is going to cause a few problems for a beginner, I tell you. And so Frank could see that that wasn't going to work, so he went and got a piece of paper and a pencil and a ruler, and he wrote out some simple exercises that I could play. And that is how the seed was planted in me, that if the material wasn't helping the student learn, you could write some other materials yourself. And that's what happened during my career of teaching. I wrote an awful lot of exercises that I thought would help students learn. So, at any rate, I wrote the intermediate book first, which is in this nice blue color that pretty much looks like the old Rubang book, in terms of color anyway. And that book had 55 exercises in 12 different keys. Again, it was still too complicated for elementary kids, and as we usually find out, it's easier to write out something that's difficult than it is to write out something that's simple. So I then, in order to get kids into this book, I was put in the position of really needing to write the elementary book. And I needed to make that as simple as possible so that it could be used at the very first meeting with the band. It could be used at the very first time that you introduce the basic text that you may be using with your class and so on. And one of the things that I did is I created a fingering chart that was playable. And you can see in this case, the first 5 sounds that you're apt to teach the clarinet might be G, F, E, D, and C. Above those notes, you see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the fingerings underneath. So, because you're dealing with students, all of the different instruments being played in your band, you would like it so that you could just call off a number and say, play sound number 1 on your fingering chart, and you would hear that sound throughout the whole band. And that's what I did. Those sounds are not all of the sounds that are possible on the instrument, only those that you're likely to play in the first year or year and a half, and certainly you can play them at the first group meeting, at least 4 or 5 of the sounds. Underneath the fingerings of the notes are the fingerings for them, and the kids see those and they learn how to read a fingering chart. So later on, when you're working in your basic text, they may get to something or want to play something and you're not around. They can go to that fingering chart and they'll be able to read it and figure out how to do it. So that's an unusual thing and a unique thing, I think, about that fingering chart. Now I see that I've been going on quite a while and I don't want to make these videos too long. I'll just say one more thing about that fingering chart. When you work with it, and especially in a group, it's not a bad idea to have a portable keyboard like this Casio keyboard that I have here. I think I paid about $50 for it. And the reason that's important is that when you ask the students to play a sound, and presumably you did that, you know, as you're teaching them the instruments, you're hopefully, if you can play the instruments, you're giving them the gift of the sound in addition to the actual pitch that they're playing. But in a group situation, you want to be certain that they know what sound you're asking for. So in this case, say the first sound is a G in the clarinet, I can go ahead and hit that note here and say this is a sound that I want out of the clarinets and the trumpets and so on. And if I want the same thing in the trombone, I would hit this one and that one for the tuba and so on. So I think that's very important because students don't really know where those pitches are, and the best thing that we can do is give them the very, very accurate pitches, and that Casio does. You can match it up against your tuner and it's right on the button. Okay, I'm going to stop there now. I thank you very much. We'll go on talking about the rest of the elementary book in the next video. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Bye-bye.